introduce Spencer Sherman. He earned a bachelor's degree at MIT in Course 21, Humanities and Science. And then he studied psychology at Stanford, where he received a master's degree in '69 and a doctorate in 1971. He's been a licensed clinical psychologist since 1980, been teaching psychology in Santa Barbara since 1979. He's been meditating since the mid-1970s. He currently provides life and executive coaching in his private practice, and one of the courses he teaches each semester at Santa Barbara College is positive psychology. He also teaches a long-running adult ed course popularly known as Consciousness Class. And he recently published a book entitled Be the Sky and Not the Clouds, a new mindful psychology of happiness and well-being that's available on Amazon. This session will be participatory and self-reflective. Please feel free to invite family and guests to join in. The only requirement is that each person needs a sheet of paper and a pen or pencil. So without further ado, let's hear Spencer.
Thank you, George. First, it's, oh good. I've got it in gallery view so I can see everybody. If possible, please put on your video, at least for right now, because I'm going to take a poll in a couple of minutes. If not, you can use the raise your hand function down at the bottom under reactions. You click reactions and then you can click raise your hand. Okay. So I'm glad we're all here. Thank you so much for coming. I especially want to thank George Sacerdote, Bob Howard, Jim Swanson, John Rudy, Stan Rose, and Lizzie Army for making this extraordinary lecture series happen. As George mentioned, you'll need pencil and paper at some point in a little while. So if you haven't got that, be a good idea to have it handy. Before the talk, I want to do a poll right now. So the way to do this is you put yourself into one of three groups, and when I call the appropriate group, just put your hand next to your face. And then I can see about how many people are in each group. If you don't have your video on, then again, you can use the reactions, raise hand, reactions down at the bottom of your screen, and then raise hand. So, with regard to mindfulness, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about this morning, today, some of us this morning, some of you this afternoon, put yourself in one of three groups. People that are unfamiliar or only slightly familiar with mindfulness, group one. People that are somewhat familiar with mindfulness and maybe have practiced a little bit, group two. And people that are very familiar or quite familiar with mindfulness and practice regularly. So please raise your hand if you're in group one, unfamiliar or slightly familiar with mindfulness. So I can see, okay, a fair number of us. Good, thank you. People in group two who are somewhat familiar with mindfulness, raise your hand. So I see also a fair number. Okay, thank you. And people who are in group three, they're quite familiar with mindfulness and doing a regular practice. No hands in that group? Interesting. Okay, so one person, Mark. Okay, great. Okay. So for people that are very familiar, like Mark, there will be time during the Q&A to add to what I have said and say anything that I should have said that I forgot to say, okay? Because we really want these folks to understand what it is that we feel is so valuable. So that's relieving to me. My worst apprehension was that everybody would be totally familiar with mindfulness and they would be looking at me like, why are you saying this stuff that we already know? But it's not the case. So I will proceed as planned, okay? Please do hold your questions or comments for the Q&A and discussion afterward. These topics, mindfulness, especially happiness and well-being, these are topics that we've all thought a lot about. And you will no doubt have things you want to add to our contemplation this morning. So please, your wisdom will be highly appreciated. But please, let's do that all at the end of the talk. Uh, so mindfulness, happiness, and well-being. These are subjects that we've all thought a great deal about, or at least happiness and well-being we've thought a great deal about. What we're going to do today is not meant to supplant what you already know. It's meant to affirm it and perhaps extend it a little. I especially hope that the two activities that we're going to do together will be both engaging and beneficial. Mindfulness first we're going to look at mindfulness and then we'll move to happiness and well-being. Mindfulness as it has become popular in the culture has become altered in its definition. It has come to mean being aware of something. To be mindful of something is to be aware of it. So for example, there's mindful eating, being especially aware of how you are eating. There's mindful walking. There's mindful conversation. There's mindful brushing your teeth. Presumably, there's even mindful taking out the garbage. I think these applications of mindfulness are all well and good, but the original definition of mindfulness, which has gotten somewhat lost, is it has certain advantages over this more popularized definition. So the original definition of mindfulness is becoming more aware, but in a very particular way. This way is highly powerful, beneficial, and perhaps even transformative. So one of the many ways, or the several ways that we can look at mindfulness from this original understanding of mindfulness is as the training of attention. So that's strange. Why does attention need training? We've been using it all our lives. Attention is how we experience the world on a conscious level. It furnishes our reality. Whatever we attend to at that moment becomes our reality at that moment. But attention works on two levels, conscious and non-conscious. Have you ever driven somewhere and when you got there, you were so lost in thought during the drive that you have no idea how you drove to where you ended up? Have you ever walked around lost in thought such that although you didn't bump into things, you had very little or no awareness of where you were walking? Of course, we all have that experience frequently. So mindfulness is making the attentional process, which often happens non-consciously, more conscious. And by becoming more conscious of attention, we gain greater control of it. It's as though attention is a spotlight. It typically moves around from object to object without our awareness that it's moving. We don't pay attention to attention. We pay attention to whatever is illuminated by attention. We see something and for a moment, that's where our attention is, that's what our reality is. And then we think, oh, that's a bird, and our attention moves to our thought process, that's our reality at that moment. Then there's a sound, our attention moves there kind of automatically, and then there's another thought, and that our attention moves to that. So our attention is moving around typically quite rapidly, and we're not aware of that motion, just what it is that the searchlight lights up. Sometimes attention will naturally rest on something for a prolonged period. For example, when you read a book, Your attention fixes on the book, and that becomes your reality for a prolonged period, whatever you're reading. Or when you watch a video, if it's a good video, that becomes your reality for the period of time that the video is playing. So sometimes this happens naturally, that attention stops and rests. Interestingly, when we try to do this consciously, when we try to put our attention somewhere and keep it there, we're not so good at it. We have because attention by habit moves by itself, when we try to direct it and steady it, we find we fail, or we don't do terribly well at it. So the mindfulness, as I am describing it, as the training of attention, involves becoming aware of the spotlight as well as what the spotlight illuminates, and not becoming narrowed onto, absorbed by whatever it is that we're paying attention to. Typically, when we pay attention to something, we kind of forget about everything. At that moment, we're not aware of anything else. Attention can only be aware of one thing at a time. Attention moves very rapidly, so it seems like we're continuously aware, but instant by instant, there's only one object of attention. And typically, when we are aware of something, at that moment, our attention is completely focused on that. It's narrowed onto that, and everything else goes away, at least for that instant. So the kind of attention I'm talking about is an open attention, such that one becomes aware of thing after thing, or the spotlight illuminates thing after thing, event after event, but we don't become narrowed onto those things to the exclusion of everything else. So let me reiterate that and show it to you on the slide so it becomes clear. So mindfulness is becoming more aware of what's going on inside and around us. That is, we become more conscious of what's happening. Inside us, thoughts and feelings. Around us, the world comes to us through our senses. So we become more aware of inner and outer reality. We notice thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they occur. We don't become narrowed onto or absorbed by anything that we're paying attention to. Rather, we remain open to all the things that are happening, or as many of the things that are happening as we can become aware of. Oops, go back. Oh, no, that's okay. So it looks like this. On the left is how we typically experience the world. Our attention moves from thoughts to feelings to sensations, and whatever our attention illuminates, that's what we experience at that moment. I call this the weather. Oh, by the way, the dotted line, that's attention. And these are the things, that's the searchlight. And these are the things that the searchlight lights up. Now, when the weather is good, it's great to be thoughts, feelings, and sensations. It's great to be the thoughts in my head, the feelings in my body, the sensations from within my body, and the sensations that bring us the world through our sense organs. So when you're having pleasant thoughts, when you're having good feelings, when your body is healthy and not in pain, when the environment is lovely, then good weather, it's great to be on the left. But what happens when the weather's bad? What happens when you're stressed out? What happens when your thoughts are worried or worse? What happens when your feelings are awful? What happens when your body is in pain or ill? What happens when your environment is noxious? Well, you get soaked. There's no way out of it. That's who you are. You're your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. When they're lousy, you're lousy. Mindfulness is gaining the ability, training yourself to do something you don't generally know how to do. Training yourself to take one step back from whatever you're experiencing and become aware of your experience rather than being identified with your experience. So on the right is the awareness of experience rather than on the left, the experiences we're having. So how do you take this step backward? And by the way, when you take the step backward, you come out of being defined by your experiences. You become a larger, unperturbed perspective. You become an awareness which is simply awareness, which isn't governed by these experiences that you are having. So how do you do this? You can't be aware of more than one thing at a time. You can only attend, the searchlight can only illuminate one thing at each instant. So if you direct your attention to your breathing, it brings you out of absorption in thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Because we have a lifetime of being identified with these things, if you pay attention to your breathing in a second or two, you'll go back to paying attention to one of these things and becoming absorbed by, typically your thoughts. So the process of learning to be mindful is a process of learning over and over again to bring attention to your breathing, and when it leaves, to bring it back to your breathing. And after a while, you can maintain what's called a witnessing awareness. You can maintain awareness of thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they happen without becoming absorbed by them. You, in my metaphor, you become the sky in which the weather exists. Now, there's a great misapprehension about meditation, which is that it's clearing your mind of thoughts. Good luck. I don't know anybody that can do that. This is rather allowing everything to be as it is, becoming more aware of everything as it is, but not becoming identified with it, not struggling with it, rather stepping back from it and becoming the wide open sky, which is always just clear and open, in which the weather can happen. So in a moment, I'm going to lead you through this, because now this is all just thoughts that we're absorbed in. But I have to mention one more thing about breathing. There are two basic, that I know of, there are two main kinds of breathing: diaphragmatic breathing and thoracic breathing. The diaphragm is a muscular ridge which separates your upper chest, where your lungs are, from your lower abdomen, where your lower organs are. So there's this muscular ridge separating your lungs from the organs below. And when this muscular ridge, the diaphragm, contracts, it moves, it flattens, and it pushes the lower organs down a little bit, and it pushes the belly out a little bit. And then when the diaphragm relaxes, it bows upward and pulls the lower organs up a little bit and pulls the stomach in a little bit. And it also, when it contracts, creates space for air to come into your lungs. And when it releases, when it blows upward, it expels air from your lungs. It reduces the space for your lungs. So that's normal, that's natural, healthy breathing. You can't feel the diaphragm moving, but you can feel your belly, for example, moving in and out gently as you breathe. The problem is when we get stressed, and especially when we get afraid, we tend to stop this kind of breathing. We tend to fix our diaphragm. We tend to tighten our belly. And that's for self-protection. It's a kind of a physical reaction, a self-protective reaction. But what it does is it stops the diaphragm from allowing you to breathe naturally. And then, in order to get air in and out of your lungs, you have to use the muscles of your upper back, your upper chest, and your shoulders. And that kind of breathing, thoracic breathing, is it's effortful and it's not efficient. It doesn't give you enough air. So one thing I would suggest is when you're walking around throughout your day, every once in a while check your breathing and see whether your belly is moving gently in and out and your breathing is natural and full. Or if you, when you find that you're not, and you find that your belly is tight and that you're breathing inefficiently, then just soften your belly and let the natural breathing happen. So I'm about to lead us through a little experience of this. Those of you who are somewhat practiced in mindfulness, they say that when you are good at a physical skill, it's sometimes valuable to go take a beginner's class because it makes sure that you're not getting sloppy about the fundamentals. So this will be a little beginner's class in the fundamentals of mindfulness. So mindfulness is easy as 1, 2, 3. First, pay attention to your breathing, and again, my voice will guide us through this. Second, soften and open. And my voice will again take us through just a brief softening and opening of various areas of the body. And finally, notice whatever is happening. Now, in mindfulness, you don't try to change anything. You don't try to get rid of anything. You don't try to eliminate anything. Rather, you take a step back from what you're experiencing and you disidentify from it. It may be stormy, but it's not you. It's not governing you. It's not defining you. It's simply something that you are experiencing, not something that you are suffering. You're a larger, unperturbed awareness in which there is whatever is happening. So, let's practice, shall we? Okay. You'll need to be sitting upright, but not rigidly. Best to put both feet on the floor rather than to have one leg crossed over the other. Check yourself to see whether you can breathe freely. If there's something that's preventing you from breathing freely, like your belt, loosen it. If your shoes are pinching your feet, you might want to loosen them or take them off. No one will see. You want to be comfortable. I'm going to close my eyes. If you think you're going to go to sleep, then you can leave your eyes open and look down. But most of us will want to close our eyes. Okay? It makes you more perceptive of what's going on inside you if your eyes are closed. By the way, your mind will wander occasionally, even though my voice is guiding us. That's normal. Typically, attention goes wherever it goes, and we don't have control over it. So don't worry when your mind wanders. Just bring it back to what I'm saying for us to do. But it's absolutely normal for the mind to kind of space out every once in a while or go somewhere else every once in a while. That's okay. All right, so sit upright but not rigidly. Close your eyes. And just feel that you are breathing. And let yourself begin to relax. That will just happen naturally as your eyes close and you notice your breathing. You don't have to make anything happen. It will all happen easily and naturally. So let's pay a little bit of closer attention to the breathing. First, pay attention to your nostrils. Notice that you can feel the air moving in and out of your nostrils. Just let the breathing be as it is. Don't try to change it. It will adjust itself. So you're just noticing the air coming in and out of your nostrils, and if your mouth is open, in and out of your mouth. Now bring your attention a little bit lower and see if you can notice a very subtle set of movements. With the in-breath, your shoulders rise just slightly, and your back opens just slightly, and your chest opens just slightly. So the air is coming in and out of your nostrils, and you can feel your shoulders and upper back and chest rising, opening a little bit with the breathing, and then closing and falling a little bit. It's very subtle, but it's noticeable. And again, you're not trying to change anything, just let everything be as it is. And now bring your attention a little lower. Bring your attention to your belly. And feel your belly move in and out with your breathing. So the whole breathing process is air coming in and out of your nostrils and maybe your mouth, an opening and closing and a rising and falling of your upper thorax, and the movement of your lower abdomen, your belly moving in and out. Now I'm going to direct our attention to throughout our body to increase the relaxation and openness of these areas. So pay special, now you can remain aware of your breathing at the same time we're doing this. But if you lose awareness of your breathing because you're focused on whatever else I'm suggesting to focus on, then don't worry, my voice will bring us back to the breathing every once in a while. So now feel your breathing, if you're not already feeling it. And pay special attention to your face. Typically, we hold an expression on our face when our eyes are open, and that involves some muscular tension. So let that tension go now. Let your face soften. Let it release any expression that it's holding. Let the lines smooth out. Let your eyes be softly closed as opposed to being held tightly closed. Let your jaw and your mouth be soft. Your mouth might even come slightly open. So your face is just releasing tension, just softening naturally. And you just let that happen. You invite relaxation. You don't insist on it. So your face is softening. Pay attention now to the sides of your head, back of your head, and top of your head, and even your brain. Let the sides and back and top of your head and your brain soften and open. Let there be spaciousness in your head area. It's like the solidity of your head kind of opens outward into a wider spaciousness. This doesn't mean you're an airhead and you lose the ability to think. In fact, it creates more awareness of your thoughts and more space in which they can flow freely. So as you soften and open your face and your head and your brain, you create a more spacious awareness. It's like your boundaries, the sides of your body kind of go away. They open outward. Pay special attention to your breathing now if you've lost awareness of it. Feel how your breathing feels. Feel what's moving as you breathe. Again, anything else you notice, just notice it. There's no need to change anything. Now bring your attention to your torso, to your neck and shoulders, to your arms and hands, and let those areas soften and open. If you're holding any tension in your neck and shoulders, arms and hands, let it release itself and blow away. Let your neck and shoulders, arms and hands become spacious and open. Also pay attention to your torso, to your back, sides, front of your body, and even your internal organs. Let your torso soften and open. Let any tension in the muscles release itself and blow away. It's as though your torso is becoming more spacious. It doesn't have defined boundaries anymore. It just kind of opens outward in all directions. And in the middle of this wide open, spacious torso, you can feel your breathing, especially your belly moving in and out as you breathe naturally. If your mind goes elsewhere, that's totally natural. When you become aware of it, bring your attention back to your breathing, to what's moving as you breathe. Pay special attention now to your lower back, your pelvis, your legs and your feet, so your lower body. If there's any tension in your lower back, pelvis, legs, or feet, you can let your body make a slight postural adjustment to release that tension. Such that your lower back, pelvis, legs, and feet soften and open. They become more spacious, less defined and solid. And you just let this softening and opening process continue and become ever more effective. So right now, we can feel ourselves breathe, and we can feel how spacious we feel, how wide open. Thoughts can cross our mind without resistance. You can just be aware of thoughts as they cross our mind. If we have feelings, they can happen in the spaciousness of our torso. So our thoughts our feelings can flow freely without resistance. And the sensations that we notice from within our body and coming through our sense organs can come through us without resistance. We're just a wide open awareness. So you're not going to hear my voice for about a minute. So we'll take the training wheels off. In this minute, notice your breathing. Let yourself continue to soften and open at every level. and notice whatever it is that you notice without losing awareness of your breathing. If you do become absorbed by something, typically a thought, when you remember, come back to your breathing and to being soft and open. You're simply a wide open awareness in which various things take place. I'll talk to you in a minute. Notice what you're thinking without becoming lost in it. If you do become absorbed by what you're thinking and forget about your breathing, just come back to your breathing, open your awareness, and allow everything to be just as it is. Notice whatever you're thinking, feeling, and sensing. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes and focus outward. With practice, you can get quite good at remaining aware of your ongoing experience without becoming absorbed by it. And therefore, you can maintain some degree of detachment from it and freedom from being defined by it. But let's look a little bit more closely. I'm going to give us a list of major benefits of mindfulness once one has learned to do it, and it's a skill that one learns by practice. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but it will give you some sense of how valuable many of us feel this is. So what is it good for? First, becoming calmer. If nothing else, you probably felt more peaceful and relaxed while I was guiding us through our experience. And that's the level at which most people interact with mindfulness. They don't go to the more subtle and, I think, valuable levels, but at least they get some relief from the chronic tension that they walk around with. So if nothing else, focusing on your breathing and letting yourself soften and open calms you down. As you pay attention, you gain clarity about what you're experiencing moment by moment. You notice things more clearly. You notice what your feelings are, what your thoughts are, and what your sensations are more of the time. So you get clearer about what your ongoing experience is. And because you're clearer about what's going on, it improves your understanding. It improves your understanding of the external world because you see, you have a more rich experience of your sensations. But it especially improves your understanding of the inner world, because you begin to see how thoughts, feelings, and inner sensations are linked up. You begin to see the patterns that, you begin to see how you're wired, what the habitual patterns are that you deploy. You look at your personality from within your personality. You look at the interaction of your personality and your physical functioning from within them, so you see them more clearly. You gain a measure of freedom from distress, for example, from anxiety and depression. The awareness itself is not anxious or depressed. It's what the awareness is aware of that may be distressing in one way or another. So by stepping back from thoughts, feelings, and sensations, you, at least to some extent, are relieved of suffering them. You gain choice about how to act consciously rather than react automatically. That is, typically we have a lot of learned reactions that we deploy in various life situations automatically, without thinking. Some of those reactions are helpful, some of those reactions are not helpful. When you become more conscious of the process, you have choice about whether to react unconsciously and habitually, or whether to choose consciously a different reaction to a particular provocation. That's huge. The fact that you now have more self-control, that you don't automatically react. You act rather than react, is a good way to put it. A perspective from which to make precise improvements. I mentioned in the promotional material for this talk that there's a confluence, there's a coming together of Eastern and Western psychology happening right now. To most broadly paint Eastern psychology, with the broadest brush paint Eastern psychology, it has to do with accepting what is. So the Eastern understanding is you're better off if you don't fight with what is, if you accept it. So acceptance is the Eastern way. The Western way, to use the broadest brush, is to change things for the better. So the synthesis of these is, if you initially accept everything as it is and are clear about what it is, then you can make very precise improvements. You can do what the Buddhists call skillful means. You can, by seeing things clearly, you can adjust things optimally. Those of you who heard about things like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, that's what they're talking about. Strangely, although many people practice mindfulness is a perspective. It doesn't have to be practiced in meditation, but most of us learn to be mindful by meditating. So most of us are learning mindful by either doing it alone or doing it in a group of people, but with our eyes closed. Paradoxically, it enhances your ability to relate to others because you're more open to what actually is happening, you're more perceptive about what's happening, and you're more accepting of both yourself and other people. So you connect better because you're more open to that connection. And finally, penultimately, you develop a greater appreciation for yourself, your companions in life, because you're taking in more information. It's a richer experience that you're having when you're mindful. And again, at the beginning, this is just something you practice for a few minutes every once in a while to get better at it. But after a while, it becomes a perspective that you can frequently adopt in moving through your life. Finally, you've probably heard about these. There are numerous probable physical health benefits. I write probable because the research is still in early stages. But these physical benefits, most of them have to do with lessening of the stress response. That is, when you're less stressed, all your systems tend to work better. So that's a little bit about mindfulness. Now what I want to do is move to happiness and well-being. Let's put on a slide about that. People have been wondering about happiness and well-being as long as people have been people. In current positive psychology, as well as I'm sure many other areas, there are two levels, there are two kinds of happiness that are distinguished. The first kind of happiness is a more superficial kind of happiness. It has to do with momentary pleasurable feelings. That's the top line here. We call it hedonia, and it is often sensorily based. For example, when you taste something good, you get a little bit of pleasure. When you get a back rub, you get pleasure. These are sensorily based momentary experiences. Sometimes they're cognitive. When you read something wonderful, you get a burst of pleasure from that. So it's a more thinking kind of experience. But these experiences are of pleasure, of how we feel. They tend to be short-lived. They tend to go away fairly quickly. We tend to adapt to them rapidly. Positive psychologists talk about something called the hedonic treadmill. It's as though you're on a treadmill and you look forward on the treadmill and there's something that you want. For example, you're hungry and you go to the refrigerator. I wonder what I can find that will satisfy my hunger and make me feel good. So you find a snack and you eat it. It's like you ran forward on the treadmill and it's wonderful. And then the pleasure fades and you slide back and you think, maybe there's something else pleasurable in the refrigerator, and you run toward it again and you eat it, and for a little bit you're satisfied, and then you slide back. Or to use a more profound illustration, you run forward to get that new car. And for a little while anyway, it's wonderful to have the new car. And then you adapt to it and you slide back, and after a while, there's another better car that drives by and you think, I'd really like that one. So this kind of happiness, this momentary pleasurable feeling, it tends not to be enduringly satisfying. And a life lived only running after momentary pleasures tends to be an unsatisfying and frustrating life. So that led Aristotle 2,350 years ago to postulate that there is a deeper kind of happiness. He called it eudaimonia. It has to do not only with how we feel, but how we function. Eudaimonia is functioning well, rather than simply feeling well. Aristotle said eudaimonia is living a worthwhile, virtuous life. That will bring a deeper, more enduring kind of satisfaction. Now, it might not involve momentary happiness all the time. That is, sometimes living a worthwhile, virtuous life might not be pleasant at all in the moment, but it might lead to a deeper kind of satisfaction. So positive psychology said, let's use happiness for the first kind of feeling. That is momentary pleasurable feeling. And let's use well-being as a term for this deeper, more enduring satisfaction. So there are a number of models of well-being in use right now. I'm just going to very briefly mention two of them, and then we're going to do an activity having to do with a third. So first, self-determination theory says we have three basic life needs. The need for competence, that is being able to get what we need in life. The need for autonomy, that is the freedom to get what we need in life. And relatedness, the need to go through life connected to other people. I think that this is a valid theory, but I think it's not broad enough. I think we have more than three basic needs. So did Martin Seligman, the prime mover in current positive psychology. He has a theory of well-being that involves 5 elements. He calls it PERMA. Positive emotion is one element of well-being. We need to feel good to experience well-being. Second, engagement. We need to be into what we're doing in order to experience well-being. The extreme of engagement is flow. That is getting so lost in what we're doing, so unified with what we're doing, that we forget about ourselves and everything else. But you don't need to be in flow to be engaged. Relationship. To experience well-being, we need to have good connections with other people. Meaning. We need to feel that our life has purpose, that it has coherence, that it has direction, that it means something, that it's non-trivial. And finally, we need to experience accomplishment. We need to achieve things. We need to succeed in what it is that we're doing. And these 5 elements, according to Seligman, summed up, create our sense of well-being. I'm not going to use either of these. I'm going to use a third. I mentioned a little while ago that there is there's a current synthesis of Western and Eastern thought. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take something from ancient Hindu thought, and I'm going to bring it forward to our contemporary Western perspective. I'm going to use the Hindu chakra system. Now, the Hindu chakra system has roots thousands of years old, but in fact, it has been reworked in the 20th century quite a bit. And the chakra system that some of you are familiar with is a very recent constellation. So I need to know something first. I need to know how many of you are familiar with the chakra system. So if you have a reasonable familiarity with the Hindu chakra system, raise your hand and keep it up for a moment by your head so I can see about how many chakra files there are. And if you don't have your video on, you can use the reactions button down the lower part of your screen, and you can click on raise your hand. So how many people are chakra files, know about the chakra system? Raise your hand and keep it up. 1, 2. Okay, you can lower your hands. So that's pretty interesting, folks. In California, I think we would have a different distribution, but let's go with what we've got. So instead of explaining to you what the chakra system is now, let's do our little activity, which assesses your well-being in 7 domains. And then we'll talk about the chakra system and what it has to say about these domains of well-being. So you're going to need your pencil and paper now. Okay. I'll grab mine. And we have to prepare our, what I call our chakragram. So I'll share my screen again and show you how to prepare it. Okay, so You see, this looks like the paper is in landscape view, but actually turn it so the vertical dimension is up and down. You want it to be, you want the 11.5 inch, the 11-inch dimension to be vertical and the 8.5-inch dimension to be horizontal. And on your piece of paper, you want to draw 7 circles. And if you like, you can put the word chakragram above them. I made that term up. But do draw the 7 circles, and they don't have to be perfect circles, by the way. I have never, I always use several pieces of paper because I can never fit, I'm spatially challenged and can never fit the 7 circles on the first piece of paper. But do that now. Draw 7 circles, okay, as illustrated. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, I'm going to ask you a question or a few questions that pertain to each of these circles. We're going to start with the bottom circle and work our way up to the top circle. So let's say I asked you, let's say the bottom circle was your breakfast today. How was your breakfast today? If your breakfast today was totally wonderful, leave the circle entirely unshaded. If your breakfast today was terrible, shade in the circle entirely. If your breakfast today was so-so, then maybe shade in the circle 50%. So let me show you. I'm going to ask you, again, a question or a couple of questions for each of these circles, starting with the bottom one. If the answer to the question is mostly yes, if you're mostly open in this way, if you're mostly realized in this way, leave the circle open to the extent that the answer is yes. So this first top circle is colored in maybe 20%. So it's about 80% open, about 20% colored in. The answer wasn't completely yes. I'm not completely realized in that way, but I'm mostly realized in that way. If the answer had been mostly no, that I was mostly closed in this way, that I was mostly not realized in this way, I would have colored in the circle the way I've colored in the bottom circle. And that one looks like it's about, 70% colored in, so about 30% open. Now, if you like, for each circle, you can put the percentage open, the percentage not shaded in, to the left of the circle. You don't have to do that, but I like to. So got it? There's going to be 7 circles. There are 7 circles. We're going to go up the circles in turn. I'm going to ask you a question or two about each circle, and you're going to color in, shade in the circle to the extent that the answer is no, not realized. You're going to leave it open to the extent that the answer is yes, realized. Okay, so we need to be, I'm going to start us out sitting with our eyes closed upright as we were when we were mindful. And then you can open your eyes and you will actually see on the slide what the question or questions are. Now don't think too much about this. We're going to go through this swiftly. Whatever is the first impression that you have, color in the circle appropriately based on that impression. This isn't set in stone. You can always go back and change it. But usually our first impression is pretty accurate. So sit upright, but not rigidly. Close your eyes. Feel yourself breathe. Just let yourself soften and open. Feel that you are breathing. Feel yourself relaxing. Just bring your attention to what's happening right at this moment. Bottom circle, you can open your eyes now and look at these questions. How well am I taking care of myself physically and financially? How well am I taking care of myself physically and financially? How safe and nurturing is what's around me, both directly around me and in the world? How safe and nurturing is what's around me, both directly and in the world? To the extent that the answer is yes, that you're fully realized in these ways, that you feel fully safe and nurtured, leave the circle uncolored. To the extent that the answer is not, no, color the circle to that extent. So do that now. How well am I taking care of myself? How safe and nurturing? Color in the circle to the extent that you're not completely realized in these ways. You're not completely fulfilled in these ways. And then if you want, you can put the percentage open to the left of the circle. And now come back to sitting with your eyes closed. Come back to right at this moment. Let go of what just happened. So relax, breathe, be very present. You're right here, right now, just sitting and breathing. You notice any tension, let it release itself. Open your eyes, second circle from the bottom. How much am I enjoying life? How much am I enjoying life? If you're completely enjoying your life, leave the circle entirely unshaded. If you're not enjoying your life at all, shade the circle in entirely. Okay, do that now. How much am I enjoying life? Shade the circle in to the extent that you are not completely enjoying life. And when you've done that, come back to sitting with your eyes closed, just feeling yourself breathe. Just allowing yourself to be soft and open. If you get lost in thought, which is natural, just bring your attention back to your breathing and to softening and opening. Open your eyes, third circle from the bottom. To what degree am I able to get what I need? To what degree am I able to get what I need? To what extent am I realizing my potential? To what extent am I realizing my potential? If you can get everything you need and you're totally realizing your potential, leave it open entirely. To the extent that that's not the case, color it in. And then come back to sitting, your eyes closed, breathing. Let go of what just happened. Just be very present at this moment. Feel yourself breathe. Feel yourself softening and opening. Open your eyes. Fourth circle. Middle circle. 3 questions. How fully do I feel all my feelings? How fully do I feel my feelings? How completely am I into what I'm doing? How completely am I into what I'm doing? How strong are my relationships? How strong are my relationships? So there are 3 aspects to this. If you fully feel your feelings, you're completely into what you're doing, and your relationships are wonderful, leave it completely uncolored. To the extent that that's not the case, shade it in. Come back to sitting and breathing. If there's any tension, let go of it. Let it release itself. Become aware right at this moment. If you're lost in thought, come out of thought. Just simply feel your breathing and let yourself soften and open. We'll figure this out later. Right now, we're just experiencing it. Open your eyes. 5th circle, up. How freely do I express myself? How actively am I sharing my vision and my gifts? How freely do I express myself? How actively am I sharing my vision and my gifts? To the extent that you're freely expressing yourself and actively sharing your vision and your gifts, leave it open. Otherwise, shade it in to the extent that that's not the case. By freely expressing yourself, I mean saying how you see things and what your perception is without holding yourself back, without suppressing your comments. Close your eyes. If you haven't already done so, just sit and breathe. Bring your awareness to this very moment. Let go of any tension that has entered your system. Feel your breathing. Open your eyes. 6th circle up. How open and curious is my mind? How open and curious is my mind? How much does my thinking energize and expand me? How much does my thinking energize and expand me? Then come back to sitting, eyes closed. Open your eyes, top circle. How completely do I identify with something greater? That is something beyond myself. It can be something in the world, a cause, for example, or it can be something transcendental, something spiritual, or it can be both. But it's something that is larger than you are that you identify with. How completely do I identify with something beyond myself, something greater than myself? Okay. Let's talk briefly about what we just did. The Hindus distinguished, or the current version of the chakra system, says that there are 7 levels to our well-being. And these questions get at how we're doing at these 7 levels. So what we just made for ourselves is a visual of our well-being according to this way of looking at what well-being is. The chakra system, it's based on so I'm going to go through these 7 levels to give you a sense of what they mean. The chakra system is based on the insight that life's fundamental motive is to grow to be fully alive. Life's fundamental motive is to be fully alive. And full alive and well-being equals full aliveness. So there are 7 aspects to this full aliveness, according to the chakra system. And we have just assessed those 7 levels of aliveness. The Hindu chakra system is what it postulates is that there is some sort of patterning energy that is not physical, that corresponds to our physical body at various locations, and that patterns are functioning at those various locations. And the ideal in the Hindu chakra system, the ideal of being fully alive is that life energy comes in from everywhere, comes up the spine and out the top of the head like a fountain. So there's a flow of life energy from the universe into us, up our spine and out the top of our head. And also, this energy flows out from various parts of our body. Um, when we're living fully, there's no resistance to the flow at any of these levels. We're open completely to life energy in this dimension. So the idea of the Hindu chakra system is to assess where we are closed, where we have developed chronic closures due to self-defense, and then to release those closures. Yoga, as it was originally understood, was a way to promote this opening up of various areas which had become closed chronically in self-defense. So the ideal yogi is someone who has life energy flowing in all these ways without restriction. And what you just made is a diagram of where your restrictions still are. Hopefully, there's a lot of air in your diagram, because we've come a long way in life and most of us have grown quite well. But probably none of us are completely fulfilled in all ways, completely unblocked in all ways, completely alive in all ways. And so where you've shaded things in, that shows you where the growth needs to happen to become more fully alive, to experience well-being more completely. Kind of like an X-ray of your functioning. So let's very quickly go through these 7 levels and what they stand for. By the way, thank you for your patience. I knew this would go a little longer than we anticipated, but we're almost done. So let's just go up these 7 levels to give you an idea of what it is that you told yourself, what it is that you assessed. So the first, we can use as a metaphor a fruit tree, a flowering fruit tree, like an apple tree or an orange tree. What's the first thing that the seed does when it's in the ground? It puts down a root. That enables it to start growing. So the first lowest area corresponding supposedly in the physical body to the spine and the lower body, the base of the spine and the lower body, has to do with your stance in life, with health and safety, with vitality, with your sense of security, how stable you are in life, how much you trust, how much you have basic trust in life, how much you feel that life is solid and dependable in you, and how much life there is flowing through you. So this is the root chakra. Unfortunately, many people haven't developed the basic trust, and they walk around with some level of fundamental anxiety. That is, there's a fundamental distrust of life that that kind of cripples them as they move through life, or kind of limits them, is a better way to put it, as they move through life. So this first area has to do with basically how alive you are, how much life energy there is flowing through you, and how secure you are in being alive. And again, using our metaphor, this is the seed putting down a root. What's the next thing that happens? The seed sends up a sprout. This is the second level supposedly the second chakra at the level of the genitals. And it has to do with enthusiasm, with pleasure, and with approach and avoidance. Any living thing, in order to remain alive, needs to do 2 fundamental things: approach opportunity and avoid threat. And pleasure in nature is an indicator of something that is life-giving, and displeasure is an indicator of something that is life-taking. So in nature, animals do and plants do what is good for them, and they avoid doing what is bad for them. And that's the level at which growth starts to happen. We start to increase our life. The seed now is a sprout growing upward. So pleasure is really important in nature. Unfortunately, human beings have invented certain pleasures that fool the brain and that are very pleasurable but are not life-giving, they're life-taking. And that's the addiction problem. Right, third level. This is the level at which the sprout becomes a trunk. It grows stronger so that it can hold up the upper structures. So now we're at the level of trunk, and this is the level of selfhood. Supposedly it has to do with the gut and the solar plexus. You can take these physical areas with a grain of salt if you like, but there does seem to be some correspondence between various difficulties we have in these areas and these psychological characteristics. So selfhood, I parse selfhood into 4 parts. Identity, knowing what your needs are. Autonomy, being free to get your needs met. Ability, capability of getting your needs met. And accomplishment, getting your needs met. So I think a strong sense of self, which is what this third area has to do with identity, autonomy, ability, and accomplishment. So it's about growing as a person. It's about developing your will such that you can be instrumentally competent in the world. You can you can do what you need to do to succeed in the world. So this is the level of the who you are as an individual and how strong you feel as an individual. Fourth area, the middle area, the heart, and I include the arms at that same level, has to do with how fully you can feel, how engaged you are with other people and with what you're doing, how connected you feel to your work and to people around you. I'll leave it there. Okay. Fifth area. This is the corresponds to the mouth, the throat, and the lungs in our body. And using the tree metaphor, this is the boughs, the limbs, and the branches. This is when the self spreads out, when the self exchanges with what's around it. So this is about communication, expressiveness, creativity, bringing yourself out into the world, authenticity, being real, exchange. This is the area where the world, where air comes into you and you breathe air out, so you're breathing in and out the world. This is where the area where you eat, you're taking the world in. This is the area where you talk to people, where you exchange with people. So some people are closed in this area and they don't adequately exchange, whereas other people do. So, oops. I told you something wrong. I got to go back up just a tiny bit, which is the fourth area, the area of the heart. That's the area of the boughs, the limbs, and the branches. That's the area where you go out from your individuality. That's, whoops, let's go back just so you see it. So this is the area where you connect with other people. So this is the boughs, the limbs, and the branches. And this is your this is where you flower. This is where you show the world who you are. If you don't flower, if you don't express yourself, you can't become pollinated. If you don't share yourself, nobody will be attracted to you. So this is the area where you need to flower. Okay. Sixth area, the area of your eyes, your ears, your forehead, and your brain. This is about expanding, the metaphor, in terms of the flowering fruit tree metaphor, this is the fruition. This is the highest level of the individual. It's the fruition of the individual person. Okay. So this is about learning, understanding, intuition, and ultimately wisdom. It is from your mind, from this area, that you expand who you are. You take in other people's perspectives in life. You identify with things beyond yourself. You grow to be a larger person than just yourself because of your capacity for understanding and ultimately wisdom. And then finally, at the top, the crown of the body, and I include also the deepest, the core of the body, because people experience going beyond self and transcendence, both as going above and also going deepest within. So using the metaphor of the tree, this is when the seeds leave the tree and go start new life. So this is the identification with something beyond yourself that's either in the world, a cause, or something that you're doing in the world that's important, or transcendent, or both. So the question comes up, let's stop for a minute. So the question comes up, what do you do to become more open in these ways? If you've got some shaded areas in your chakragram, which we probably all do, the question is, what do you do to open them up? And there are therapies and growth techniques for all of there are specific growth techniques for all of these areas. But I'll make one general comment that is valid for every area, which is, if you need to learn to be more open, more realized in a particular way, get with people who are. And in interacting with people that are more realized in this or these ways, you learn to be more open and realized in those ways. So, thank you for being so attentive. Now let's move to the Q&A and discussion section, and we'll talk a little more about this. There's one more, one more thing I got to show you, which is this. These are the questions that I asked. If you want to take a screenshot, this will help you understand your chakragram, because these are the questions. So you can take a screenshot of this. You can also email me, and I'll email you this if you like. This is the description of the 7 areas that we just saw. You can take a screenshot of that if you like. I'm totally open to being contacted about anything we did this morning. So you can either email me at that address or through MIT, or you can contact me through my website. That's my website. It has a lot of stuff on it, audio files and video files that help you with mindfulness and with well-being. And I just want to thank you for your kind and prolonged attention and for all that you contribute to the world.
Can you put the questions up again?
Yeah, absolutely. So here are the questions. And again, you can email me and I'll email them to you also, if you like. So those are the questions. And these are the descriptors. So let's go here. So in the limited time that we don't have left, let's talk a little bit. What are your questions? What are your comments? How did this go for you? I drove you through a lot of introspection this morning or this afternoon.
Okay, here's a question. Spencer, from one person who wrote, mindfulness during eating. I really enjoy eating good food and wine, expertly prepared in various countries. The sensory experience and the taste buds, especially when grown in our own garden. My wife, on the other hand, a biochemical technician by training and a nutritionist, judges the different chemical ingredients and the contents consumed. Which of us would you say is more mindful? And are you stressing the depth of hierarchical thought? And why concentrate on what is going on in my breath or my head rather than unconsciously letting the second brain in my gut do its thing? Several questions in that.
Several questions in that. Okay, so paying attention to your current sensations is being mindful. So on that level, the person that is tasting is being more mindful than the person that is analyzing. That isn't to say that analyzing isn't a wonderful thing to do, but how often do we eat and not even taste what we're eating because we're lost in thought? And so we lose the satisfaction of what we're eating, and often that causes people to overeat, because we eat not only for nutrition, we also eat for emotional satisfaction. So I would suggest that both these things, both the experience and the analysis, are wonderful things to do, but one needs to have choice about when to pay attention to the sensations and feelings that result and when to analyze. Otherwise, there's a tendency to always be lost in thought and to miss the richness of the sensations. What was the last part of the question, George?
Last part was, why concentrate on what's going on in my breath or head rather than unconsciously letting that second brain in my gut do its thing?
Because there's more satisfaction in being consciously aware of what that gut is telling you.
Okay.
It increases the satisfaction to be conscious of it.
All right. Another question has to do with multitasking, which is sort of the antithesis of focusing on anything. Would you care to comment on it?
Yeah, the research is pretty clear on this. When you take habitual multitaskers and you ask them to concentrate on a particular task, they do worse on that particular task than people who aren't habitual multitaskers. So by multitasking, you can do a lot of stuff poorly. And when you try to do something well, you're actually less good at it than people who are practiced at doing one thing at a time. I'm not saying never multitask, but if multitasking is all you do, it has a tendency to slight the various things that you're doing. And it also has a tendency to reduce your ability to focus in a prolonged way. And we see that a lot in our kids. Go on.
Okay. Another person observed that watching a concert on television or on Zoom is a very different experience from being in the concert hall, in the sense that in the one, you mentally switch away from it all the time, whereas in the concert hall, you're much more likely to stay focused on the people on the stage.
That's true, and it always amazes me that when I go to a concert, that people are chatting right until the concert starts. And I think if they would take 5 minutes to be mindful, to just be very present and very open, then their experience of the music would be richer. I think we have a tendency to stay lost in thought even when we are paying attention to what we're sensing, and it diminishes the sensory experience. And certainly, when we interact digitally, there's a dimension that's lost. Those of you who teach, I'm still teaching, and I'm back in the classroom now after 2 years of exclusively teaching by Zoom. It's a world of difference. It's so much more engaging for the students. It's so much richer. So there's a real problem in the fact that young people increasingly are experiencing the world through a device rather than directly.
Another person observed that your focus on breathing sounded suspiciously like the Lamaze training that they went through for childbirth umpty years ago. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know much about Lamaze, but I know that it helps you, okay, to not get lost in thought and freak out, right? To stay with your breathing and your present experience rather than catastrophizing. And those are people that have panic attacks. It's really helpful to teach them to not get lost in that spiraling thought process. To notice it, but not identify with it completely. It's when things are not okay that it's really a good idea to take a step back and to disidentify with the stuff that you're experiencing that's really not helping you.
Another question had to do with the hedonic, and I forget the name of the other
Eudaimonic.
Of long-term pleasure.
Yeah.
And asks the question of advertising, particularly consumer advertising. Where does that fit on that spectrum?
Oh, okay. Just off the top of my head, I think that consumerism rests on hedonism. That is, if you're not happy, all the advertisements that we have experienced, and there are at this point millions of them, all have the same subtext, the same underlying message, which is, get this and you will be happy. So the idea is, if you're not happy, go out and get this thing and you'll be happy, but it'll fade really quickly, and then you've got to go get something else. So it keeps the engine of commerce running, but it is very frustrating because you always adapt to what you have and want something more. And I think that's we're victimized that way. That we have learned that what we have will make us happy, and if we're not happy, we got to get more stuff. We don't have the right stuff. When we get the right stuff, then we'll be happy. That's wrong.
Here's another question from the audience. How did your patient population change during the COVID pandemic? I guess there's two shapes of that. One is, was the mix of patients different, or was their issues, were their issues different?
I don't do a psychotherapy practice now, I do a coaching practice. And my clients are long-term typically. They're typically business people, not all, but they've been with me for a long time. So what they're dealing with changed to some extent with the pandemic, but they're basically who they are, and their issues that they've been working on for a long time are still the issues they're working on for a long time. But I can anticipate from the question a response that my colleagues would have, which is that what they're seeing is a lot more anxiety and depression. Because we know that in the youth, in everybody, but especially in the youth, anxiety and depression have gone through the roof since 2012, when social media became ubiquitous. And the pandemic has accelerated that increase in anxiety and depression, especially amongst the youth. So I just started a bunch of classes at City College, and people write introductions for me, and a significant percentage of the students volunteer to tell me how anxious and depressed they are. When you look at the statistics, there's a University of Michigan in 2020 put out something called the Healthy Minds Survey. They looked at college students all over the place, and they said that about 40% of college students at this point are clinically depressed, clinically anxious, 36% are clinically depressed, and about 75% say they need mental health intervention now. So even if they're not at that level, they're significantly distressed. So what we've seen since social media happened, and especially in girls, but in both genders, but especially girls, and especially since the pandemic happened, is we've seen that the youth are not all right. Remember the Who song, the kids are all right? They're not, and we all know that. And the reason for that seems to be the situation in the world, and also the way they're experiencing the world, which is on their devices, too much. That's a long answer to that question, but I think it kind of gets at what the question asked.
Yeah, there were a couple of questions about the 7 chakras. One person was having a hard time distinguishing amongst them. They seem to overlap too much. And another person observed that they got very different responses from one question to another. And what is the significance of that?
Yeah, so the overlap, some of the chakras are like overtones of the more basic chakras. The first 4 are the more basic ones, and the 5th, 6th, and 7th are overtones. So there is some correspondence between the 2nd and the 5th, for example. Okay, so that was the first part. The second part is, the 2 questions. Yeah, there are levels to these chakras, unfortunately. So I put together, I tried to be inclusive, so I put together 2 or 3 questions which got at different levels of the same kind of energy, the same kind of psychological constellation. So I realized that at one level you could be very into the work that you're doing, but you could have lousy relationships. So the 4th chakra you could have a kind of mixed bag about. But both of these have to do with how heartful you are, how engaged you are in work and love. Remember what Freud said just before he died, when he was asked, what should a healthy person be able to do? He said, Lieben und arbeiten, love and work. And that was a pretty focused answer. But the 4th chakra has to do with how into your work you are and how into your love you are. But I do understand that this was not an easy exercise, this well-being exercise, and I didn't do justice to the chakra system, and I didn't really do justice to well-being either, but I at least gave you some hints about where your growth could happen. This is a growth-promoting exercise. It shows you that there's still some opening to be done to create greater aliveness, greater well-being. And that was the intent of that little exercise. Go on.
The last question we have on the list here is, another one has come in, so we'll come back to that in just a minute. Some people sometimes say to totally relax, do something, quote, mindless, unquote. How does that square with your mindfulness approach?
Sometimes that's great. You want to get your mind off that which is worrying you. So if you can distract yourself, if you can go watch a good video, then you're not distressed, right? But then you come out of the good video and you are distressed again. And sometimes even when you try to distract yourself at a non-conscious level, you're still worried about something. So that dissociative strategy works some of the time to some effect. But the associative strategy, the strategy of fully acknowledging what's going on inside you and around you without being governed by it, allows a more profound kind of release from distress, a more profound kind of relaxation and opening. And with practice, this is a skill. You get better when you practice this. I suggest that you practice 5 minutes a day, and after a while, you get to be able to maintain this non-attached perspective. You get more aware of what's going on and less governed by it. And that allows you to increasingly to be increasingly unstressed, not stressed out by what's going on in your life. So it's a more enduring, more complete kind of relaxation. But that isn't to say that sometimes you just want to get your mind off something, and distracting yourself is a great way to do that. It's just not a long-term fix.
Someone here has asked, in your experience, how long does it take of practicing to gain the benefits of mindfulness?
That's all. Okay. I'll give you the short answer to all these questions. The very first time you practice mindfulness, you get more relaxed. Unless you're really distressed, in which case you get worse. But most of us got more relaxed today. My voice just kind of let us relax, and that was wonderful. So that benefit you get immediately. How long does it take before you can witness your thoughts without immediately getting drawn into them? Much longer. And how long does it take before you can maintain this witnessing perspective as you're walking through your life doing stuff? As I'm teaching a class, when I kind of get off track, I feel my breathing, I open up, and I start again in a more lucid way. How long does that take? A while. It's not, this is a profound, it's like another operating system. It takes a while to establish it. It takes a while to wire it into the brain. But it's a profoundly useful operating system. And for those people that are practiced at this, talk to them about it. Talk to them about what benefit they have gotten from those weeks, months, or years of practice. The good news is you see benefit as you practice, you see increasing benefit. You're less governed by your life experience, you're more aware of it. And that happens progressively.
A couple of plaudits from members of the audience. One said your explanation of the chakras was actually much more helpful than the questions themselves. And a second person pointed out that as a person walking the yogic path, your explanations have been clear and simple with gratitude.
Well, thank you. These are profound understandings. And I tried to cram two of them into a very short amount of time in a user-friendly way for people that weren't particularly aware of them beforehand. And I knew beforehand that I would do a less than perfect job, but I hope that I at least have given you a hint that there's something really important here. That the way that we have learned to walk through our lives is not the only way to walk through life, and that there are supplementary skills that we can learn that really, really, really help. We teach these kind of skills now to 4- and 5-year-olds, and it makes a big difference for them. We teach them to relax. We teach them to understand what they're thinking and feeling. We teach them to not react automatically. We teach them how open they are in all these ways, how alive they are in all these ways, and they really, it really promotes their growth. And I think at any age, these things are very revealing and empowering. And again, what I did this morning is like a hint of the value of these things. I'll at the risk of self-aggrandizing here, I'll tell you that in the book that I just wrote, I made these things real clear and real simple. And a little bit more, you can read, you'll take in a little bit more than in this incredibly small amount of time. Other questions or comments?
A couple more questions here. Do you use this therapy in conjunction with traditional therapies?
Oh my God. Mindfulness has, it's really taken psychology by storm. If you talk to most people that do therapy, either psychologists or marriage and family therapists or other counselors, they will say, I can't believe that I used to do therapy without being mindful myself and without teaching my clients to be mindful. It really has put an accelerator. It's made our therapeutic interventions much more effective. So this is really disseminated in the psychological community in a ubiquitous, almost ubiquitous way. So it really does change how I approach the therapeutic interaction and how the client approaches the therapeutic interaction.
Here's another very specific question. How about waking up from a bad dream? I get up for an hour rather than trying to fall back to sleep. does your technique apply to controlling the thoughts upon falling back to sleep again?
How do I answer this? There's a group of people in Indonesia called the Senoi, S-E-N-O-I. In 1936, a man named Kilton Stewart visited them. They had not been visited by outsiders before. And Stewart said that this group of people, even though they were, quote, primitive, end quote, are psychologically much healthier than anybody else on the planet. Why? Because they learn to lucid dream when they're very young. And when they have a difficult dream, instead of trying to get away from it, they change its course. They go back to sleep or they stay asleep, and then they say, okay, instead of running away from this thing that was trying to get me, I can grow 200 feet tall and I can look it in the eyes and I can say, what are you? What do you have to teach me? Why are you here? So they can gain some control over their dreams. By practicing not avoiding difficulty in dreams, but rather seeing what it symbolizes. This is all you, inside you. It's all your mind trying to work out your life situation. So if you understand the symbology, you can make profound changes in the course of the dream and in how you deal with the thing in life. You can see what the villains are, and you can deal with the villains in dream, and you can deal with the villains better in life. You're not afraid of stuff. How mindfulness would interact with that? I think if you practice becoming mindful, then you don't get so immediately drawn into whatever you're experiencing. You can remain calm in the midst of very distressing thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And I think that would transfer to being able to go back into the dream in a more mindful way.
Someone here has asked, given that your neighbors are the Sussexes, would they and other royals benefit from chakra?
Okay, so first of all, mindfulness is about becoming more aware. Who would not benefit from becoming more aware and more self-controlled? It would be wonderful if everybody understood themselves a little better and was able to work themselves a little better. The world would be a different place. As for the chakra system, if people could understand where they were limited, where because of their life experience they had closed up chronically, they would be able to experiment with opening up those closures and living more fully in those ways. Okay, psychologically, our problem is we have chronic closures and they limit us. Psychotherapy is about opening up those chronic closures so that we're not limited. Would everybody in the world benefit from that? You bet. We all ought to be working on, I'm sure we all are working on ourselves to try to understand where we're limited and how to open those limits.
Another person asked whether or not the approaches that you're advocating require a patient to go to the therapist on a long-term basis, or whether it's something that can be done on a short-term intervention.
First of all, more and more psychotherapy is being done short-term intervention, but I'm not talking about psychotherapy. I'm talking about skills that every human, we should have learned when we were 4. This whole thing is remedial. I start every one of my classes by saying, look, everybody, this is stuff we should have learned when we were 4 years old. This is how to work your mind. This is how to be healthy psychologically. This is stuff that you don't need to go to a therapist for. This is stuff you just need to learn to do.
Interesting.
And even though we're, it's funny, even though we're so smart intellectually, we're kind of dumb emotionally, a lot of us. That is, we don't do so well about emotional intelligence. And we do some stuff automatically, unconsciously, that we're embarrassed by or ashamed by. and we can go, we lived a long time, but we still carry these personality quirks with us. It would be nice to clear these and become more open and connected and intelligent in these ways also.
So we seem to have run through the questions. Does anyone have anything else to ask coming in through the chat line? And if not, may I suggest that people unmute themselves and greet each other or have some casual conversation about this.
Oh, also, I wanted to say, if there's if this provoked anything in you and you really want to pass it by me, but you didn't want to do it in this group, just email me and maybe we'll set up a Zoom session or we'll set up a phone call. I'm really happy to help you in any way with these things. And I'm not talking about professionally, I'm talking about as classmate to classmate, okay? So please, if anything got stimulated in you that you want to share or you want to ask about it, just contact me. All right, so we're going to unmute ourselves.
Sure.
Thanks, Spencer. Great job.
Great, yeah. Welcome. I want to thank everybody that's still here. I knew that there would be, I told George, there'd be a bimodal distribution about this. Some people are going to hear this and they're going to go, oh my God, it's California airhead stuff. I'm out of here. And other people are going to realize that this is psychological health and it's really important. And so you folks are the folks that realized that this is something we all ought to be paying attention to. This is not supplementary. This is not trivial. This is really profound. So thank you for being of that population that realizes that there is some value in this stuff.